Are you a business owner who happens to be forgetful? Like you tend to forget to follow up with clients when it comes to managing your team. You tend not to follow up on like, our tasks done? Oh yeah, I was supposed to check in with something like that. If you have these sort of memory lapses, yes, part of that problem can be there's just too many things going on for you to actually like have all the space in your brain to remember them. And, or it can also be a self-sabotaging pattern that you're not even aware of in trying to solve with productivity hacks and project management softwares. And that's why in this clip, I'm going to show you one example of what that looks like. And this is a clip taken from my Joyous Profits podcast. This is where I coach business owners live on air on how to map out which identity and leadership upgrades they need to make in order to make more joyous, peaceful profits. Okay. So in this clip, you're going to see Hutton Henry, who is a very successful serial entrepreneur. He came onto the podcast talking about, I'm so brilliant at what I do, but when it comes to managing my team, there's all these slip ups. And he now mentions in this particular clip how memory seems to be something that a lot of his like team members have when they're like dealing with stuff. But like for him, it always slips. I just can't keep people accountable because I just forget because there's so many things going on. So what you're going to see first is him like talking about this from the clip from the podcast. And you're going to see my commentary where I'm going to basically show you why a lack of memory is oftentimes just self-sabotage, how to actually spot this type of self-sabotage and what it is that you actually have to do about it. And in this instance, I'm going to show you what the root cause was for Hutton, because it had nothing to do with memory. It actually had to do with his association with leading his team and keeping his team accountable, and how I went about helping him process that. Okay, so here's the clip from his podcast episode talking about the memory piece.
And I watch some of the people who work with me. I've got some great team, and they've managed teams, and you can see their memory is so sharp on what was promised, what did we agree. So I will make an agreement with you, Jasko, and you say I'll do that in 2 weeks. A week or so in, my brain is working on so many things I won't remember to think, oh, did they check into that? So there's some measurements, there's some things I can do to avoid that, put things in the diary, but it isn't a natural skill of mine to do that.
All right, so let's break that down into a few key things that are very relevant for this memory slash self-sabotage discussion. So number one, Hutton mentions that the people that he works with, that have managed teams before, they got this great memory and they're able to just stay on point with regards to if this was promised, they check in, etc. But for me, it's not a natural skill. I got so many things I need to do. There's so many options on where my brain needs to process things. It's just not a natural skill to follow up on. And on the surface level, like as far as the iceberg and like you're looking at the top of it, that explanation totally makes absolute 100% sense. And in that explanation, if you look at the nuances of what he's saying, one key piece is he mentions I could just get better at putting it in the diary or in the calendar. And in that instance, like that will probably help. So if we now zoom out, you got to look at the context of just that one line, right? Because this is where these self-sabotaging patterns actually reside. This is where the root cause oftentimes is. He has a solution or a potential solution to this very big problem, right? Because again, he's coming onto a podcast to be coached live on air because management issues and confrontation issues and all the things, you can watch the full episode, it's bad enough that like I'm willing to go and do this publicly. And yet here's a potential solution for it, yet I'm not implementing it. Okay, so that's the first red flag as far as self-sabotage. I know what the answer is. I'm not even experimenting with it. Okay, so what is that particular gap? As you will see in this follow-up that I'm going to share with you right now, the real problem has actually nothing to do with memory. Okay, so check this out, and then I'm going to comment on just deeper nuances of this.
I think the lack of memory is only half of the problem. And then the other half of the problem is I just don't like confrontation. So you put those together, that is pretty lethal.
Okay, so this is now where it gets interesting, right? He says it himself. The lack of memory is half the problem. The other half of the problem is that I don't like confrontation. And you put those two together and it's lethal. Okay, so again, this is how self sabotage works, especially in a business context. You are absolutely accurate. You are describing the situation and the circumstances with the appropriate level of awareness. And the subtleties of self sabotage keep you blind to what the actual core issue is, even though he actually said it, which is actually a fear of confrontation. So here's the thing: memory is one of these interesting things where it's actually very dependent on your emotions. Okay. Regardless of what you think of Tony Robbins, he has this great example with regards to like how our memories and our beliefs actually work. But it basically says like information without the emotion is just something that's like very nebulous and disappears into the ether, for lack of a better term. And the example he always uses is, if I asked you where you were on 9/11, there's a high likelihood that you know exactly where you were where 9/11 happened. But if I asked you where you were on 8/11, you have absolutely no idea. Like, where was I even on 9/10? No idea. But it's true. I actually remember, like I was in school. I remember when that happened. Why? Because it was an information, an event triggered by such like immense emotion around me. Okay. Now, how does this relate to self-sabotage, confrontation, and basically leading a team? If you watch Hutton's full episode, and I have other breakdowns of him on the channel, the thing that we uncover on this is he very much fears confrontation, does whatever he can to avoid it. And as I always say, self-sabotage is very real, but doesn't actually exist. Meaning the consequences of it are real. In the sense, the realness of it is he's self-sabotaging here because he's not confronting and keeping his team members accountable. But it doesn't actually exist because subconsciously there's a part of him that is basically just doing everything that it can to avoid confrontation. What's a great way to avoid confrontation? Well, if you conveniently forget to keep your team members accountable, if you don't implement the things you know how to do that would make it easier to follow up with them, if you keep your instructions vague and not specific, then there's nothing for you to ever actually confront them about. Now you get to unpack this massive iceberg, right? This is what's under the surface, that it's like, ooh, this has nothing to do with memory. It's got everything to do with my subconscious being scared to actually go and confront people. Okay, and this is the thing with profit and time leaks. Business owners will go to many hardcore lengths to try and bring in more revenue, grow the business, figure out my systems, do all of the things. And they're implementing all of these things while simultaneously self-sabotaging them. i.e., you're trying to pour into the bucket of your business while you are not addressing the leaks at the bottom. This is why you get burnt out. This is why things fall apart. This is why things stall. Because you keep pouring more and more, trying to raise that level. In my model of that is I'm trying to raise the level of my freely available time, my freely available profit to do the things that I want to do to fund the ideal life that I want to live. But if you can't do that because you have holes that are leaking at the bottom, one of which is self-sabotage, then we're spinning our wheels here unnecessarily. And this is where entrepreneurship gets unnecessarily stressful and unnecessarily hard. Okay. This is why when I walk people through my Peaceful Profits roadmap, which is basically my assessment and self-discovery process to map out all of the identity and leadership characteristics that are causing these profit and time leaks, and essentially walking you through how to stop them based off of your assessment. There's 64 stress drivers like self-sabotage that I assess for to actually get an idea of like, why is this not working for you when you've already tried all of the things? So if that's of interest, you can check the links and stuff below. Otherwise, see you on the next one, and love to know what resonates with you with this one.